The victory over the first wave of Drakari ships had been decisive, but Admiral Cooper knew the real battle was just beginning. Deep space sensors detected something massive approaching from the outer system, moving with the slow inevitability of a natural disaster. The Drakari mothership was a creature beyond imagination, a biomass the size of a small moon that had grown fat by consuming the gas giant Jupiter's atmospheric layers. Captain Dan Morgan watched from the orbital platform, Mjolnir as the massive entity approached Earth. The creature was visible to the naked eye now, a dark shadow against the stars that seemed to bend light around its edges. Long-range scans showed it was still feeding, drawing in matter from Jupiter's atmosphere through massive organic tubes that stretched across millions of miles of space. Dr. Foster analyzed the sensor data with growing alarm. The mothership was not just large, it was actively growing larger as it consumed Jupiter's hydrogen and helium. If allowed to complete its feeding, the creature would have enough mass to simply ignore any weapons humanity could bring to bear. They had one chance to stop it before it became unstoppable. Colonel Ben Carter coordinated the ground-based response as smaller Drakari biopods began raining down on Earth's surface. These creatures were different from the space-based ships, designed for planetary assault and consumption. They landed like meteors, creating impact craters that immediately began sprouting organic growth. Within minutes of touchdown, the pods were sending out tendrils that consumed everything they touched. Colonel Sarah Mitchell led the ground defense teams as they deployed portable railgun systems against the invading biopods. Her soldiers carried weapons that looked like oversized rifles but fired tungsten slugs at velocities that could punch through tank armor. The portable railguns were simple, reliable, and devastatingly effective against the organic invaders. The biopods tried to adapt to the kinetic weapons just as their space-based cousins had attempted. They grew thicker armor plating and developed energy shields, but the laws of physics remained constant. Mitchell's teams moved from pod to pod, systematically destroying each one with precision railgun fire. The creature's adaptive abilities were impressive, but they could not evolve past the fundamental reality of high-velocity impacts. Major Chris Evans prepared for what he knew would be a suicide mission. The orbital platform Thor carried the most powerful railgun in Earth's arsenal, a massive electromagnetic cannon capable of launching projectiles at velocities approaching light speed. The weapon required so much power that firing it would overload the platform's reactors and destroy the station. Evans positioned Thor directly in the path of the approaching mothership, ignoring the protests from his sister commander Linda Evans, who commanded a nearby defense satellite. Chris knew the mathematics as well as anyone. To penetrate the massive creature's bioarmor, they needed a direct hit at point-blank range. Someone had to get close enough to guarantee accuracy, and Chris had volunteered for the job. Dr. Foster coordinated the final battle plan from her laboratory on Earth's surface. Every railgun installation in the solar system would fire simultaneously at precisely calculated coordinates on the mothership's hull. The strike had to be perfect, targeting weak points that computer analysis had identified in the creature's organic structure. One chance with no margin for error. Admiral Cooper gave the final authorization as the mothership entered the inner solar system. The massive creature's gravitational field was already affecting Earth's tides, and its biomass was so dense that it created visible distortions in space-time. The Federation ships cowered behind their barriers, their crews watching in fascination and terror as humanity prepared for the most important battle in galactic history. The coordinated strike began with the ground-based installations. Thousands of electromagnetic cannons fired in perfect synchronization, launching tungsten rods, depleted uranium penetrators, and exotic metal projectiles toward their target. The sky above Earth lit up with the trails of countless projectiles streaking toward their destiny among the stars. Captain Steve Williams added the orbital platform's firepower to the barrage. Platform Zeus fired projectiles the size of city buses at velocities that turned them into spears of pure energy. Platform Apollo launched a spread of smaller rounds designed to overwhelm any defensive capabilities the mothership might possess. Every human weapon in the solar system focused on a single target. Lieutenant Kate Williams watched from her ground installation as the massive tungsten rod she had fired disappeared into the star-filled void. The projectile would take several minutes to reach its target, traveling at speeds that compressed time and space around its passage. She held her breath and waited for the impact that would determine humanity's fate. Major Evans positioned Thor for the final strike as the other projectiles raced toward their target. His platform's massive railgun had been charging for hours, building electromagnetic fields so powerful that nearby space itself seemed to hum with energy. The weapon would fire only once before destroying itself and everything around it, but that single shot would carry more kinetic energy than all the other weapons combined. The first wave of projectiles struck the mothership with impacts that lit up the solar system. The creature's bioarmor absorbed some of the kinetic energy, but the sheer volume of the barrage overwhelmed its defensive capabilities. Massive chunks of organic matter broke away from the main body, each piece the size of a city as it spun off into space, trailing bioluminescent fluids. The mothership's death throes began before the main barrage had finished impacting. The creature writhed in space like a wounded animal, its massive tentacles lashing out at empty void as internal explosions tore through its biomass. The organic tubes connecting it to Jupiter snapped under the stress, releasing clouds of frozen atmosphere that sparkled like diamonds in the distant sunlight. Major Evans fired Thor's final shot as the mothership convulsed in its death agony. The platform's massive railgun launched a tungsten rod the size of a subway car, at velocities that approached the theoretical limits of matter acceleration. The projectile struck the creature's core with an impact that generated a brief, new star in the darkness of space. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface as the mothership's biomass underwent rapid decomposition. The creature had stored enormous amounts of energy during its feeding on Jupiter, and that energy was now being released all at once. The sky literally burned as debris from the massive entity entered Earth's atmosphere, creating meteor showers that painted the heavens with fire. Platform Thor disappeared in the mothership's death explosion, taking Major Evans with it. Commander Linda Evans watched from her nearby station as her brother's sacrifice saved not just Earth but the entire galaxy. The massive creature that had consumed countless worlds was finally dead, its biomass scattered across the solar system like a macabre celebration. The smaller Drakari bioships that had been supporting the mothership immediately began dying as well. Without the central organism to coordinate their actions, the creatures reverted to simple biological functions and quickly succumbed to the hostile environment of space. The entire swarm that had terrorized the galaxy was being destroyed by the death of its central node. Colonel Mitchell's ground teams finished mopping up the remaining biopods on Earth's surface. The creatures had lost their coordination and were now simple organic masses that could be easily destroyed with conventional weapons. The Drakari invasion was over, defeated by humanity's mastery of the fundamental physics of warfare. Dr. Foster watched the sensor displays as the last traces of the mothership's biomass drifted into Jupiter's gravity well. The massive planet would eventually absorb the remains, adding alien organic matter to its swirling atmosphere. The creature that had seemed unstoppable was now just another component of the solar system's cosmic dust. The Federation ships emerged from their hiding places behind Earth's moon, their crews silent with awe at what they had witnessed. Humanity had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest civilizations could not, using weapons that the aliens had dismissed as primitive toys. The sky above Earth continued to burn with falling debris, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and determination. The first Drakari attack began with a sound like breaking glass amplified across the vacuum of space. The bioships launched thousands of living projectiles toward Earth, each one pulsing with organic light as it accelerated through the void. From the orbital command center, Admiral Cooper watched the incoming swarm with cold calculation. The Federation had described these attacks, but seeing them firsthand was different. The projectiles moved like a school of luminous fish, weaving and dodging in patterns that seemed almost beautiful. The Federation ships hiding behind Earth's moon immediately opened fire with their remaining plasma cannons. Brilliant beams of superheated gas lanced out toward the Drakari bioships, striking their targets with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, the alien vessels seemed to recoil from the assault, their translucent hulls glowing where the energy weapons made contact. Captain Steve Williams watched from the orbital platform Zeus as the Federation weapons did their work. The plasma beams carved deep gouges in the Drakari ships, exposing interior structures that pulsed with alien life. It looked like the energy weapons were working, but Williams had read Dr. Foster's reports. He knew what was coming next. The effect was visible within minutes. The wounds on the Drakari ships began to seal themselves, the damaged tissue regrouping and hardening. More importantly, the bioships began to develop new structures on their hulls, crystalline formations that absorbed and redirected the plasma beams. The Federation weapons that had seemed so effective were now feeding energy directly to their targets. Council leader Zethvar's voice crackled over the communication channels, ordering the Federation ships to cease fire. The aliens' usual composure had cracked completely, replaced by panic as the Drakari vessels grew visibly stronger with each energy weapon strike. The bioships were adapting in real time, their organic technology evolving to counter every attack thrown at them. Admiral Cooper activated Earth's defense grid with a single command. The massive railgun installations across the planet's surface began their firing sequence, electromagnetic fields building to levels that made nearby electronics hum with interference. Colonel Ben Carter's voice echoed through the command channels as he coordinated targeting solutions from installations in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Lieutenant Kate Williams operated one of the largest surface installations from her position in the Rocky Mountains. The massive cannon she controlled was as long as a city block and required a nuclear reactor to power its electromagnetic coils. She watched her targeting display as the computer calculated trajectory, windage, and projectile velocity with mathematical precision that would have impressed the ancient artillery masters. The first railgun salvo fired with a sound like thunder rolling across the planet. Thousands of tungsten rods launched simultaneously from installations around the globe, accelerating to velocities that turned the projectiles into streaks of fire across the sky. The rods were simple chunks of metal, but at the speeds humanity's railguns achieved, they carried the kinetic energy of falling meteors. Dr. Foster monitored the strike from her laboratory, watching as sensors tracked the projectiles through their brief journey to the Drakari ships. The mathematics were elegant in their simplicity. Mass times velocity squared divided by 2. Energy that could not be absorbed or redirected because it was not energy at all, but simple physical matter moving at impossible speeds. The tungsten rod struck the Drakari bioships with impacts that lit up space like a fireworks display. Unlike the energy weapons that the aliens could adapt to, the kinetic projectiles simply punched through whatever they hit. The bioships' adaptive capabilities were useless against chunks of metal moving at near relativistic speeds. Captain Williams coordinated the orbital strike from platform Zeus, his electromagnetic cannons adding their firepower to the surface installations. The orbital weapons fired larger projectiles at even higher velocities, turning asteroids and space debris into devastating kinetic weapons. The combined barrage created a wall of metal death that the Drakari bioships could not evolve to counter. The effect on the alien creatures was immediate and catastrophic. Bioships that had survived countless energy weapon attacks began breaking apart under the kinetic bombardment. Their organic hulls evolved to absorb and redirect plasma, offered no protection against simple physical matter moving at incredible speeds. Chunks of alien biomass drifted away from the impact sites, glowing with bioluminescent death throes. The Federation observers watched in stunned silence as humanity's primitive weapons systematically destroyed an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The railgun installations fired in continuous waves, each salvo sending thousands of projectiles toward the Drakari swarm. The targeting computers adjusted for each shot, learning from previous impacts to improve accuracy and effectiveness. Colonel Carter's surface installations proved their worth as the battle intensified. The massive cannons could fire projectiles as large as small buildings, creating impact zones that vaporized everything within miles of the strike point. The Drakari bioships tried to adapt, growing thicker armor and developing energy shields. But nothing could stop the relentless kinetic assault. The orbital platforms added their own devastating firepower to the mix. Platform Thor, commanded by Major Chris Evans, specialized in long-range precision strikes that could take out specific targets with surgical accuracy. Platform Mjolnir, under Captain Dan Morgan's command, focused on area bombardment that turned entire sections of space into killing fields. Lieutenant Williams watched her targeting display as more Drakari ships appeared at the edge of the system. The bioships were learning from the destruction of their advanced scouts, developing new tactics to counter the kinetic weapons. They began spreading out and using evasive maneuvers, but the railgun targeting computers, compensated with predictive algorithms that calculated where the aliens would be rather than where they Whir. The tide of battle shifted as more Drakari vessels fell to the kinetic bombardment. The bioships that had consumed entire star systems found themselves helpless against weapons they had never encountered before. Their adaptive evolution, perfected over millennia of energy weapon warfare, was useless against the simple physics of mass and velocity. Dr. Foster analyzed the battle data in real time, adjusting firing solutions and targeting priorities based on Drakari behavior patterns. The aliens were trying to adapt, growing new structures and changing their flight patterns, but kinetic energy could not be evolved away. A chunk of tungsten moving at near-light speed would destroy whatever it hit, regardless of the target's defensive capabilities. Admiral Cooper ordered the second wave of installations to begin firing as the first wave reloaded. The massive electromagnetic cannons operated in rotation, maintaining a continuous barrage that gave the Drakari no opportunity to regroup or adapt. The space around Earth became a shooting gallery, where human ingenuity met alien arrogance and proved superior. The Federation ships emerged from behind the moon's protection, their crews desperate to witness humanity's impossible victory. Council leader Zethavar's voice carried across the communication channels, no longer commanding but pleading for an explanation of how primitive kinetic weapons could succeed where advanced energy technology had failed. The answer was visible in the burning wreckage of Drakari bioships that littered the space around Earth. Humanity had mastered the fundamentals of warfare while the aliens chased complexity and sophistication. Sometimes the simplest solution was the most effective, and there was nothing simpler than hitting your enemy with a very fast rock. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the massive space station grow larger through the viewport. The structure was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction, with crystalline towers that sparkled like diamonds and metal sections that seemed to bend light around them. This was the heart of the Galactic Federation, home to thousands of alien species from across the galaxy. Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was leading humanity's first diplomatic mission to join this ancient alliance. Behind him, Admiral Lisa Hayes checked her equipment one final time. She carried the holographic projectors that would demonstrate Earth's most advanced military technology to the Council. Their railgun systems represented the pinnacle of human engineering, and Jake hoped they would be enough to earn humanity a place among the stars. The Liberty docked with a soft thud that echoed through the hull. Jake straightened his uniform and walked toward the airlock. Dr. Amy Foster, their chief scientist, fell into step beside him. She had spent months preparing the technical presentations that would showcase humanity's capabilities. Her nervous energy was obvious as she clutched her data tablets. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor filled with beings that looked like they had stepped out of a dream. Tall, graceful creatures with blue skin and forearms glided past. Small, furry beings with large eyes chattered in musical tones. A massive creature that looked like a walking crystal formation moved slowly down the hall, leaving tiny rainbow reflections on the walls. Jake had seen the recordings from First Contact, but being here in person was different. The air smelled strange, like ozone mixed with flowers. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal. Everything reminded him that humanity was very far from home. Their escort was a being called Zethtal, who looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a person. Its 4 eyes blinked independently as it spoke through a translation device that made its voice sound like wind chimes. It led them through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past viewing windows that showed the infinite black of space dotted with distant stars. They entered the council chamber, a massive dome where representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in floating chairs arranged in concentric circles. At the center was a raised platform where petitioners could present their cases. Jake had never felt so small. The chamber buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages, creating a sound like a river flowing over rocks. Council leader Zethavar called for silence. The being was tall and thin with gray skin that seemed to shimmer. Its voice carried easily through the chamber without amplification. It welcomed the humans with formal words that felt cold and distant. Jake got the impression that this was a routine procedure, like processing paperwork. Admiral Hayes stepped forward and activated her holographic projectors. The air above the platform filled with images of human starships and weapon systems. She began explaining the railgun technology that Earth had perfected over the past century. The weapons used electromagnetic fields to launch projectiles at incredible speeds. They were simple, reliable, and devastatingly effective. The presentation showed test footage of railguns destroying asteroids and enemy targets. The projectiles moved so fast they were invisible to the naked eye, appearing only as brief flashes of light before impact. Hayes explained how the weapons could be scaled from small infantry weapons to massive ship-mounted cannons capable of cracking mountains. As the presentation continued, Jake noticed the alien delegates beginning to murmur among themselves. At first he thought it was interest, but the sounds were wrong. There was laughter in the mix, and not the good kind. Some of the aliens were pointing at the holographic displays and making gestures that needed no translation. A representative of the Vorthak, a species that looked like upright lizards, stood and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. The translation device made its words clear enough. It called the human weapons primitive metal throwers that belonged in a museum. Other delegates nodded in agreement, their various forms of laughter creating a cacophony that filled the chamber. The crystalline Zephyrians were worse. Their representative created sounds like breaking glass that the translator rendered as mockery about humans still playing with rocks and sticks. They displayed their own weapons technology, showing plasma cannons that could melt through armor in seconds and dark matter disruptors that could unmake targets at the molecular level. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment and anger. These aliens were treating humanity's greatest achievements like toys. Dr. Foster's hands shook as she tried to adjust the presentation parameters, but it was too late. The damage was done. Council leader Zethvar called for order and delivered the Federation's verdict. Humanity was too technologically backward to contribute meaningfully to galactic defense. Their kinetic weapons were outdated by several thousand years. However, the Council was willing to offer Earth Protectorate status. Humanity could provide raw materials and agricultural products in exchange for basic protection from external threats. The offer was delivered with the tone of someone giving charity to a beggar. Jake felt every eye in the chamber watching as he stood to respond. His voice was steady despite the rage building inside him. He thanked the Council for their consideration but declined their generous offer. Humanity would chart its own course among the stars. The aliens seemed surprised that the primitive humans would refuse such a gift. Some laughed again, predicting that Earth would come crawling back within a few years when reality set in. Jake gathered his team and walked out of the chamber with as much dignity as he could manage. The journey back to Earth felt longer than the trip out. Admiral Hayes sat in angry silence, replaying the presentation and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Dr. Foster buried herself in technical manuals, muttering about electromagnetic field calculations. Jake stared out at the stars and wondered if humanity would ever find its place in this vast galaxy. When they reached Earth, President Karen Walsh was waiting for their report. The emergency session in the White House Situation Room included General Patrick Stone and the top military leadership. Jake delivered the news with military precision, but everyone could hear the disappointment in his voice. General Stone slammed his fist on the table and declared that humanity would show these aliens what real warriors could do. Dr. Foster suggested focusing their efforts on improving railgun technology even further. If kinetic weapons were primitive, then humanity would make them so advanced that the aliens would have to take notice. President Walsh listened to all the arguments before making her decision. Earth would not bow to alien arrogance. They would build their defenses and prove their worth through actions rather than words. If the galaxy wanted to dismiss humanity as primitive, then humanity would show them the power of primitive weapons perfected through human ingenuity and determination. 6 months had passed since humanity's rejection by the Galactic Federation, and Admiral Ryan Cooper watched the crisis unfold from Earth's Orbital Defense Command. The massive view screen showed real-time updates from across the galaxy, each red dot representing another world consumed by the advancing Drakari swarm. What had started as scattered reports from the Outer Rim had become a full-scale invasion that threatened to devour everything in its path. The Drakari were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced before. They were not a single species but a collective of parasitic organisms that consumed entire worlds and incorporated the biomass into their fleet. Their ships were living creatures the size of cities, capable of evolving and adapting to any threat within hours of first contact. They had broken through the Federation's outer defenses like a knife through paper. Cooper studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The Federation's most powerful fleets had engaged the Drakari near the Centauri cluster and been completely destroyed. The plasma cannons and energy weapons that the aliens were so proud of had proven useless against an enemy that could adapt to energy-based attacks almost instantly. Each battle only made the Drakari stronger, as they learned to counter every weapon thrown at them. Reports flooded in from fleeing Federation ships. The Drakari biovessels would approach a planet and begin consuming everything organic. They started with plant life and worked their way up the food chain until nothing remained but bare rock. The biomass was then incorporated into new ship creatures that joined the swarm. It was a form of warfare that the civilized galaxy had never imagined possible. Dr. Amy Foster had been working around the clock in her laboratory, analyzing every piece of data about the Drakari that Earth could gather. Her husband, Colonel Ben Carter, commanded the ground-based railgun installations that now dotted every continent. The massive electromagnetic cannons were humanity's answer to the alien threat, and Ben had been drilling his crews day and night to prepare for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation. The first Federation refugees arrived at Earth 3 days later. Their ships were damaged and their crews demoralized. Many of the aliens who had laughed at humanity's primitive weapons now looked at Earth's defenses with new eyes. The massive railgun installations were visible from orbit, their long barrels pointing toward the outer system like the spears of an ancient army. Council leader Zethvar arrived aboard a heavily damaged flagship, its crystalline hull cracked and leaking atmosphere. The being that had once dismissed humanity with casual arrogance now begged for sanctuary with desperate urgency. Cooper met the alien delegation in the orbital station's docking bay, flanked by armed Marines carrying the latest railgun rifles. The council leader's gray skin had taken on a sickly pale color, and its usually steady voice shook as it spoke. The Federation was in full retreat, their fleets scattered and their worlds burning. They needed Earth's protection, not as subjects seeking a patron but as refugees fleeing certain death. The irony was not lost on Cooper, but he kept his expression neutral as he listened to the plea. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison, recently promoted after his diplomatic mission, arrived to handle the negotiations. He had prepared for this moment during the long months of building Earth's defenses. His response was cold and direct. Humanity would defend Earth not for the aliens but because it was their home. The Federation ships could shelter behind Earth's moon, but they would not be allowed to interfere with human defensive operations. More Federation fleets arrived each day, their captains telling increasingly desperate stories of the Drakari advance. The swarm had consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space where civilizations had thrived for millennia. The bioships grew larger with each world they devoured, some now approaching the size of small moons. Their adaptive capabilities had evolved to counter every weapon in the Federation arsenal. Dr. Foster presented her analysis to the Defense Council with scientific precision. The Drakari bioships could absorb and redirect energy weapons, making them stronger with each attack. Their organic hulls could rapidly develop immunity to plasma, laser, and particle beam weapons. However, their adaptation was limited to energy-based threats. They had never encountered pure kinetic weapons like humanity's railguns. Colonel Carter coordinated the final preparations for Earth's defense grid. The massive installations could launch tungsten rods the size of telephone poles at velocities approaching a significant fraction of light speed. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Mass times velocity equals force, and at the speeds humanity's railguns could achieve, even small projectiles carried the energy of nuclear weapons. The orbital platforms were equally impressive. Captain Steve Williams commanded the station Zeus, a massive structure bristling with electromagnetic cannons. His wife, Lieutenant Kate Williams, operated one of the ground-based installations that could punch holes through asteroids. They had trained together for months, learning to coordinate strikes between orbital and surface weapons. Admiral Cooper received the first reports of Drakari scouts entering the outer solar system on a Tuesday morning. The bioships were smaller than the massive creatures described in Federation reports, but they moved with purpose toward the inner planets. Long-range sensors showed them beginning to sample the atmospheres of the outer gas giants, testing the local biomass for potential consumption. The Federation ships hiding behind Earth's moon began broadcasting frantic warnings about Drakari tactics and capabilities. Their advice was useless since it was based on energy weapon strategies that had already failed. Cooper ignored the alien chatter and focused on his own battle plans. Humanity would fight this war with the weapons they knew best. The first wave of Drakari arrived 3 days later. The bioships that emerged from hyperspace were unlike anything in Earth's databases. They looked like massive jellyfish crossed with mechanical constructs, their translucent flesh pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Sensor readings showed they were already beginning to adapt to the electromagnetic signatures of Earth's communication systems. Dr. Foster watched from the command center as the alien creatures began their approach toward Earth. The Federation representatives pleaded with Admiral Morrison to evacuate, claiming that no planet had ever survived a Drakari assault. Morrison's response was to order the first wave of railgun installations to begin targeting solutions. The bioships moved with organic grace, their forms shifting and flowing as they approached the inner system. They launched smaller creatures toward Earth's atmosphere, testing the defenses with probing attacks. The Federation ships cowered behind their protective barrier, unwilling to engage an enemy that had destroyed their greatest fleets. Colonel Carter's ground installations tracked the approaching targets with mechanical precision. The massive railgun barrels adjusted their elevation and azimuth with smooth electronic hums. Loading mechanisms slammed tungsten projectiles into firing chambers with sounds like thunder. Everything was ready for humanity's first real test against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy. Admiral Cooper gave the order that would change everything. Earth's railgun defense grid powered up with a sound like rising wind, electromagnetic fields building to levels that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The aliens hiding behind the moon watched in fascination and terror as humanity prepared to demonstrate the true power of primitive weapons perfected through centuries of warfare. The sky above Earth began to glow with the building energy of 1,000 electromagnetic cannons preparing to fire in unison. The silence that followed the destruction of the Drakari mothership was profound. Across the Sol system, debris from the massive biocreature drifted like glowing snow, each piece catching starlight as it tumbled through the void. Not a single Drakari organism had survived humanity's kinetic bombardment. The swarm that had devoured countless worlds across the galaxy was completely extinct, wiped out by weapons the aliens had considered primitive. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Federation vessels emerge from behind Earth's moon like frightened children leaving their hiding places. The alien ships moved with hesitation, their crews still processing what they had witnessed. Council leader Zethvar's crystalline vessel approached slowly, broadcasting formal requests for permission to dock and discuss terms. The irony was not lost on Morrison. 6 months ago, these same aliens had laughed at humanity's railgun technology and dismissed Earth as too backward to join their galactic community. Now they came as supplicants, begging for the protection that only human weapons could provide. The galaxy had learned a harsh lesson about the difference between complexity and effectiveness. Dr. Amy Foster found herself appointed as the Federation's new director of kinetic weapons research within hours of the battle's end. The promotion came with resources that exceeded Earth's entire military budget and a mandate to adapt human railgun technology for use by alien species across the galaxy. Her first assignment was working with Commander Helen Price to establish manufacturing facilities on 12 Federation worlds. The technical challenges were immense. Most alien species had evolved along different technological paths, focusing on energy manipulation rather than kinetic physics. Their manufacturing processes were optimized for creating plasma cannons and particle beam weapons, not the precise electromagnetic coils required for railgun systems. Foster would need to redesign entire industrial infrastructures from the ground up. Council leader Zethvar arrived aboard Morrison's flagship with a formal apology that was broadcast across both human and Federation communication networks. The gray-skinned alien's voice carried none of its previous arrogance as it acknowledged the Council's grave error in judgment. Humanity was not just being offered membership in the Federation, they were being asked to take a leadership role in galactic defense. The terms had changed completely from the initial negotiations. Instead of humanity providing raw materials in exchange for protection, the Federation was offering technology transfers, trade agreements, and territorial rights in exchange for access to railgun technology and human military expertise. Earth would become the center of a new defensive doctrine based on kinetic weapons rather than energy systems. Captain Tony Clark led the first human exploration fleet beyond Federation space within weeks of the victory. The fleet carried a message that Earth stood ready to defend any world threatened by adaptive enemies. Clark's ships were equipped with the latest railgun technology and crewed by veterans of the Drakari battle. Their mission was to demonstrate that the galaxy now had protectors who could not be easily defeated. The response from previously unconquered worlds was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had lived in terror of potential Drakari invasion sent delegations to Earth, offering alliance agreements and resource sharing in exchange for human protection. The railgun technology that had been dismissed as primitive was now the most sought-after military equipment in the galaxy. President Karen Walsh addressed both Earth and the Federation Council from the United Nations, building in New York. Her speech was broadcast to billions of beings across thousands of worlds, marking humanity's emergence as a major galactic power. She spoke about the importance of mastering fundamentals rather than chasing complexity, and how human determination had overcome seemingly impossible odds. The construction of new railgun platforms began immediately, with Federation resources supporting human manufacturing capabilities. Captain Steve Williams found himself promoted to Admiral and placed in charge of the new Galactic Defense Initiative. His experience with orbital weapons platforms made him the ideal candidate to oversee the deployment of railgun technology across Federation space. Lieutenant Kate Williams, now Colonel Williams, established the first off-world railgun training facility on the Federation world of Kepler Prime. Her installation would train alien personnel in the operation and maintenance of kinetic weapon systems. The curriculum emphasized the human philosophy of warfare: simple, reliable, and devastating effective. Dr. Foster's research teams worked around the clock to solve the technical challenges of adapting railgun technology for non-human species. Different alien physiologies required different control interfaces, and varying planetary conditions demanded modifications to the basic electromagnetic principles. Each solution brought humanity closer to its new role as the galaxy's military technology leader. The memorial service for Major Chris Evans was attended by representatives from across the Federation. His sacrifice in destroying the Drakari mothership had saved not just Earth but potentially every world in the galaxy. Commander Linda Evans accepted the decorations on behalf of her brother, including medals from alien governments that had never before honored a human soldier. The economic transformation of Earth was equally dramatic. Human manufacturing capabilities expanded exponentially as Federation resources poured into railgun production facilities. Cities that had struggled with unemployment found themselves becoming centers of military technology production. The demand for human expertise in kinetic weapons created opportunities that would last for generations. Colonel Sarah Mitchell established the first interspecies military academy on Mars, where human and alien soldiers trained together in combined arms tactics. The curriculum emphasized the integration of kinetic and energy weapons, teaching alien forces how to coordinate with human railgun units for maximum battlefield effectiveness. The academy graduated its first class within a year, sending mixed species units to defend Federation worlds. The first reports of another Drakari incursion came from the Andromeda Galaxy 18 months after the Sol system battle. This time, humanity was not caught unprepared. A combined fleet of human and Federation vessels moved to intercept the new swarm, carrying both energy weapons and railgun systems. Captain Clark commanded the human contingent aboard the newly commissioned Starship Liberty. The battle that followed demonstrated the evolution of galactic warfare. Federation ships engaged the Drakari biovessels with their traditional energy weapons, forcing the creatures to begin their adaptive evolution. Then the human vessels opened fire with coordinated railgun barrages, exploiting the aliens' focus on energy-based defenses to deliver devastating kinetic strikes. The sky burned once again as Drakari bioships fell to the combined assault. But this time, humanity was not alone in the fight. Alien crews operated human-designed railgun systems alongside their own energy weapons, creating a devastating combination that the Drakari could not counter. The swarm was destroyed in a matter of hours rather than the days of fighting that had characterized the Sol system battle. Admiral Morrison watched the victory reports from his office in the new Galactic Defense Headquarters on Earth's moon. The facility coordinated military operations across hundreds of star systems, with human officers working alongside alien counterparts to maintain the peace that kinetic weapons had made possible. The galaxy that had once dismissed humanity as primitive now looked to Earth for protection and leadership. The War transformation was complete when President Walsh announced the establishment of the Terran Protectorate, a formal alliance that placed dozens of worlds under Earth's military protection. The Protectorate was voluntary, with member worlds contributing resources and personnel in exchange for access to human military, technology, and strategic doctrine. Dr. Foster's final report on the Drakari conflict concluded with observations about the nature of warfare and evolution. Complex adaptive systems could overcome almost any energy-based threat through biological evolution, but they remained vulnerable to the fundamental physics of mass and velocity. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology, but their willingness to perfect simple solutions rather than chase sophisticated complexity. The memorial wall in the Galactic Defense Headquarters listed the names of all human personnel lost in the conflict, with Major Chris Evans's name prominently displayed at the center. Below the names was an inscription that captured the essence of humanity's victory, in memory of those who proved that sometimes the best answer to complexity is a very fast rock. The galaxy that had once mocked humanity's railguns now lived under their protection, and the sky would burn no more with the fires of unconquered worlds.